The sun hung in the sky like a molten copper coin, beating down on the rutted, dust-choked main street of Fort Sumner. A biting, hot wind, a common feature of the plains, whipped the grit into miniature cyclones that danced between the false front buildings. The air smelled of dry sagebrush, stale whiskey, and the ever-present sweat of men living hard. A group of riders approached from the west, their silhouettes sharp against the blinding light. 4 figures, all lean and trail-hardened. At the head rode William H. Bonney, 21, known to the legend makers as Billy the Kid. His face, usually youthful, was set in a mask of grim determination beneath the wide brim of his dust-caked Stetson. Behind him were 3 loyal members of his gang: Charlie Boudre, a quiet, reliable man with a weathered face; Tom O'Folliard, younger, prone to nervous energy but deadly with a Colt; and Dirt Jake, a hulking man who rode with a Winchester rifle cradled like a child. They were riding into trouble, and they knew it. They drew their mounts to a halt outside the Dry Gulch Saloon, the sound of their horses' hooves muted by the thick layer of fine, red dust. The squeak of their saddle leather and the faint metallic clink of their spurs broke the heavy midday silence. Every man in town not working stopped to stare at the notorious crew. The saloon was dark and stifling, the air thick with the smell of old tobacco, cheap rye, and unwashed bodies. A few hard cases sat nursing their drinks, but the usual rowdy noise was absent. The place felt like a waiting room for the damnation. Billy stepped inside, his low-slung belt and twin Colt .45 revolvers, the only ornamentation needed. His eyes, quick and predatory, scanned the room. Charlie and Tom took positions by the bar and door, their hands never far from their sidearms. A thin, middle-aged man in a worn vest, the bartender, wiped a glass with a dirty rag. He spoke without looking up, his voice a dry rasp. "Heard tell you boys were heading for Arizona. Got lost, Bunny?" Billy walked to the bar, resting his hands lightly on the mahogany surface. The brass rail was cool against his worn leather gloves. "Word travels slow, partner. We got business here, serious business. We're looking for a man named Josiah the Preacher Miller. Tell me where he can be found." The bartender flinched, glancing toward the rear office door, but quickly recovered, shaking his head. "Never heard of him. Just passing through, are ya?" "No, friend. We ain't passing through. A friend of ours was bushwhacked near the Rio Pecos crossing. Miller was his partner. We aim to find out who did the killing and why. The blood still ain't dry on the trail." "Dirt!" Jake laughed, a low rumble that unsettled the nervous patrons. The bartender finally pointed a trembling finger toward a dilapidated livery stable down the street. "Try the stable. He tends horses. Keeps mostly to himself. After what happened, he ain't looking for company." The stable reeked of hay, manure, and distressed animals. Billy and his crew found Miller sitting on an overturned bucket, meticulously cleaning a saddle, though his movements were slow and disjointed, like a broken clock. Josiah Miller, in 40s, thin and wiry, looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and held the hollow look of a man who'd seen the devil and been abandoned by God. He was wearing faded overalls and a wide-brimmed hat, the sort a ranch hand would wear, not a gunslinger. Billy approached alone. The sunlight filtering through the gaps in the stable wall painted stripes across the dust-filled air. "You Miller? Josiah Miller?" "That's right. What's your need, mister? If it's feed, I'm sold out. If it's trouble, I ain't armed. Neither is necessary. I'm William Bonney. I knew your partner, Jesse. We had dealings, heard what happened up north of the Pecos." Miller dropped the rag. The metallic clink of the buckle hitting the dirt floor echoed in the barn. A single horse stamped its hooves nervously. "Jesse's dead, Bonney. Shot for nothing at all. They just wanted to send a message." "Who? Who sent the message? Who put a slug in Jesse's back?" Miller stood up, his gaze sweeping the outlaw's face. He saw not the cold-blooded killer of the dime novels, but a young man whose face, despite the reputation, was full of intense, focused anger. "You want names?" I got names, but they ain't worth the paper they're written on. Not against the likes of the Rutherford Syndicate. They sent 3 jackals, mean ones, men who kill for the sheer sport of it. Let's hear it, Miller. Tell me everything. No names are too big for us. Miller explained the escalating land war. Jesse had a small, valuable piece of land, a vital water source, that the powerful cattle baron Rutherford wanted. Jesse refused to sell. Rutherford didn't send no lawyers, Bonnie. He sent Bart Cullen, the leader, a snake, a dead-eyed viper who smiles when he works. Cullen brought Deacon and Hoyle. They cornered Jesse, and they didn't just kill him, they made it a show. Miller's voice cracked. He reached inside his shirt and pulled out a simple wooden cross necklace, rubbing it between his thumb and index finger. Jesse's boy, a child of 8, was hiding in the brush nearby. Saw the whole damn thing. Cullen made sure the boy saw it. He told the boy to watch the buzzards pick at his pa, to remember who rules the territory. Billy's jaw tightened. He had seen plenty of violence, but striking at a child was a line even he rarely crossed. The quiet code of the trail was absolute. Children and women were off limits. Where's the boy now? Safe, up in the hills with a rancher, I trust. But he ain't never gonna be right, Bonnie. He ain't never gonna be the same. I just want justice. Not vengeance, Bonnie, justice. That ain't a word we hear much on this border. Miller looked Bonnie in the eye, his gaze steady despite the grief. This was the vulnerable yet courageous man the rumors described. You know what happens to men who cross Rutherford? The sheriff here, Elias Reed, he's on Rutherford's payroll. He wouldn't ride a mile to save Jesse's soul. You're a killer, Bonnie. But you got a code, a reputation for standing up to the big dogs. We all got a price, Miller. Mine ain't money. It's what you call a debt of blood. That kind of cruelty ain't for gentlemen, or even decent outlaws. It belongs to the dust. Billy drew a breath, the gritty air scratching his throat. He looked at his gang members who nodded silently. They understood. All right, Miller, I'll take it. We'll find these 3 curs and we'll settle Jesse's account. But you listen close. This ain't gonna be a clean fight. The first shot fired. We're all wanted men, more than we already are. You understand the risk? I've lived with risk since they buried Jesse. All I ask is that they face the sun when you do it. They'll face the sun, partner, I promise you that. Billy and his gang rode out, turning their backs on the livery stable. The promise was made, the debt accepted. As they reached the edge of town, Dirt Jake nudged his horse alongside Bonnie's. Boss, did you see that fella across the street? By the butcher's shop, the one with the cheap, shiny boots. I saw him, Jake, been watching us since we rode in. He ain't from around here, too jumpy. Too much iron for a simple butcher, too. And when we shook hands with Miller, he bolted into the back alley like a rabbit. Billy pulled up his horse and stared back at the main street, the heat causing the air to shimmer above the buildings. That's a watcher, boys. Rutherford ain't fooling around. They knew we were coming, or they put eyes on Miller just in case. They're sitting on this town like a hen on a bad egg. What now, Billy? Do we ride on 'em now? Asked Tom O'Folliard, his hand already gripping his gun handle. Billy shook his head slowly, a cold, calculated look replacing the anger in his eyes. No. We rode in too easy. That means we were allowed to. They were watching Miller to see who he talked to. They want to know what we know. So they're watching the witnesses, huh? Not just the witnesses, Jake. They're watching us. We got ourselves an audience, boys. We got to disappear, figure out where those 3 hounds are barking from, and then we come back to Fort Sumner and burn the house down. Billy reined his horse hard, kicking up a cloud of ochre dust. He led his gang off the trail and into the confusing, rocky labyrinth of the surrounding hills, leaving the watchers with nothing but an empty trail to follow. 3 days later, the gang was holed up in a narrow, rock-sheltered box canyon 10 miles from Fort Sumner. The high desert night was clear and freezing, the stars hanging low and brilliant like shattered glass above the jagged peaks. The only sounds were the whisper of the cool wind and the nervous champing of the tethered horses. A small fire crackled, providing more meager comfort than heat. Billy, Charlie, Tom, and Dirt Jake sat around it, their faces illuminated by the flickering orange glow. The mood was grimly professional, the tension palpable as they went over their next move. Miller gave us 3 names: Bart, Cullen, Deacon, and Hoyle. We know they're on Rutherford's payroll. But where are they now? Charlie asked, stirring the meager coffee in his tin mug. Cullen's the one we need. He's the head snake. The others are just fangs, Billy stated, cleaning the cylinder of one of his Colts. The smooth, oiled mechanism clicked reassuringly. We need eyes on the ground, but we can't show our faces in Sumner. That town's got more ears than a field of corn, Tom added, checking the load on his Winchester repeater. Dirt Jake, usually stoic, spoke in a low, gravelly voice. I sent 2 runners, boss. 2 kids I trust. They ain't got the look of outlaws. They'll find out where Rutherford hides his hired help. They'll blend in. Good. Any other word from the watchers Miller told us about? We rode past that butcher shop. He's still there, named Slim. Just a small-time spy, easy to scare off, Charlie reported. No, we leave Slim alone. He's there to watch Miller, not to fight us. We hit him, we spook the whole nest. We're aiming for the falcons, not the crows. The runners returned just as the moon reached its zenith. They had the scent of the wolves. Boss, they ain't in Sumner. Rutherford's got 'em spread out, they reported, their voices low and breathless. Bart Cullen, he's up near the Triple R Ranch, out in the breaks. He's the foreman now, keeping the hands in line. They say he sleeps with his gun hand wrapped around his pillow. Deacon and Hoyle? Deacon is down south near the dry wash bank. He's collecting debts for Rutherford. And Hoyle? Hoyle's working security at a saloon Rutherford recently bought in Cimarron. All 3 spread thin, thinking they're safe. Billy leaned back against the cool stone, rubbing the stubble on his chin. A small, cold smile touched his lips. The plan began to form, sharp and deadly. That's clumsy. Cullen's a mean dog, but he's proud and stupid. He keeps his men close. Spreading them out means they feel too safe. They underestimated us. What's the play, Billy? We hit all 3. That's too much ground to cover, too much risk of a marshal spotting us, Charlie cautioned. We hit the head first. Cullen, he's the one who gave the order, who looked the boy in the eye. That debt is his to pay. The first light of dawn brought a fierce cold, which quickly gave way to a blinding heat. The men worked methodically, preparing their gear for the raid. Triple R is 3 ridges over. It's built in a defensible position. We can't ride straight in. They'll see the dust cloud from miles away. We need to go around the long ridge and come in from the North Canyon, Billy laid out, sketching a quick map in the sand with a twig. They'll have guards, boss. 4 or 5 men besides Cullen. Cullen don't trust no one, Jake commented, checking the action of his Winchester. That's why we take Deacon first. We need to scare Cullen, make him sloppy. Make him think he's surrounded before we even ride up, Billy corrected himself. A sudden shift in the plan. They needed the psychological advantage. Cullen needed to know the kid was coming. Deacon is in town, collecting bank debts. That's exposed. He'll be in the open. We take Deacon quiet-like. Send a message to Cullen with Deacon's gear. Make Cullen sweat a little. How do we take him quiet? Tom asked, his eyes wide. The dry wash bank is small. Only one entrance. Deacon will be inside or outside on a horse. We wait for him to be exposed. No shots fired unless absolutely necessary. We move fast, hit hard, and disappear back into the hills before the locals can even reach for their shotguns. Billy stood up, strapping his gun belt tight. The leather creaked, the sound of business commencing. He looked at each man in turn. Remember why we're doing this. This ain't about loot. This is about a code, a debt. When you pull that trigger, you remember Jesse's boy. You remember justice. We understand, boss. We're ready to ride, Charlie confirmed, mounting his horse. The men mounted their horses, the silence of their preparation replaced by the heavy breathing of the animals and the rhythmic clink of their gear. The sun was now fully up, beating down with the promise of a brutal day. Tom, you ride ahead. Watch the trails. If you see dust, you signal. Jake, you cover the rear. Charlie, you're with me. We ride south to the wash. It's time to settle up. Billy pulled his Stetson low over his eyes, shielding them from the harsh glare. The air was thick with tension, the dust of the trail seeming to hold its breath. The town of Dry Wash was less a settlement and more a cluster of tired buildings hugging a dried-up riverbed. The heat was almost unbearable, making the planks of the boardwalk groan. Billy and his men waited 2 miles out, hidden behind a desolate stretch of sandstone rock formations. They watched the town through field glasses. He's there, outside the bank, sitting on the steps like he owns the whole territory, Charlie whispered, pointing to the tall, lanky man identified as Deacon. Deacon was indeed lounging on the bank steps, a shotgun resting across his knees, the picture of arrogance and entitlement. He's alone, only a teller inside. That's sloppy. Too confident, Billy observed. We move now. Jake and Tom circle wide around the back, cut off any possible escape through the North Trail. If a soul gets on a horse, you shoot the horse. Charlie and I will take the main street. The plan was simple. A lightning strike, speed over subtlety. They rode in at a hard trot, their faces obscured by bandanas pulled up over their noses. The rhythmic thump-thump of the horses' hooves grew louder, echoing off the empty buildings. Deacon spotted them too late. He scrambled up, dropping the shotgun, fumbling for the pistol on his hip. "Hey, who the hell are you?" Tom O'Folliard, positioned on the flank, didn't hesitate. He shot Deacon's horse, which was tied to the railing. The horse collapsed with a terrible cry, pinning the railing and Deacon's escape route. "Don't move, Deacon!" Billy yelled, dismounting, his Colts already drawn and leveled. The cold steel looked black and menacing in the sun. Deacon, trapped and exposed, tried to draw his pistol, but the sight of the notorious Billy the Kid and the 3 guns trained on him froze him solid. He knew the odds. "Bonnie, you're a long way from home, kid. Rutherford will have your head for this. Rutherford's a long way from here, Deacon, and you ain't got no head to worry about if you don't listen. Drop the iron, slowly." Deacon's face, pale with fear, finally gave in. His pistol hit the dusty ground with a soft thud. Charlie kicked it into the weeds. They did not waste time. They dragged the terrified Deacon to an abandoned well house behind the saloon, tying him securely to the heavy wooden crank. "Talk, Deacon." "Why Jesse? Why the boy?" Billy demanded, his voice low and dangerous, his gun pressed against the man's temple. Deacon, terrified by the proximity of death, began to spill the guts of the operation. He was a coward, just as Miller had described. "It wasn't just the water rights. Rutherford, he's in deep with the Santa Fe ring. The land's just a front. They're running guns, kid, across the border, Jesse's land. It was the perfect cut-off point for the smuggling trail. Cullen wanted to make an example, shut up anyone who might talk." "Cullen, where is he really? Not the Triple R. That's a goddamn barn, not a fort." Deacon's eyes flickered with a raw fear. "He's at the old Mesa crossing. The ring's got a hideout there. Hidden. Cullen took a squad. They're waiting for an arms shipment from Mexico. He's got 5 men with him. They're setting up a trap. A trap for who? For you, Bonnie. Rutherford found out Miller was talking to you. Cullen was ordered to draw you out. If you hit the Triple R, his men would ambush you in the hills. He figured you'd be too proud to let him live." Billy's nostrils flared. The scent of gunpowder and old fear was heavy in the air. The internal conflict flared. Survival demanded retreat, but the code demanded execution. "So you were all bait, and you all knew about the boy." "Cullen made us do it. He's the one. Let me go, Bonnie. I'll ride out of the territory. You got the information." Billy stepped back, his face devoid of emotion. He looked at the man, a low-life dog, a pawn in a bigger, dirtier game, but a man who chose cruelty. "You didn't just kill a man, Deacon. You killed his son's soul. That debt has to be paid in full." Billy nodded to Charlie. Charlie unholstered his pistol. The clink of the hammer pulling back was the loudest sound in the entire town. Deacon screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror. "Blast!" The shot was deafening. Deacon went instantly silent, his body slumping against the crank. "It's done. Take his belt, his knife, leave the body for the vultures. We need Cullen's gun to send the message." They quickly collected Deacon's distinctive leather gear. Billy looked at the abandoned wellhouse. The silence now was oppressive, the tension replaced by cold finality. "Cullen's waiting for us at that mesa crossing. He's got 5 men. He thinks he's got the advantage. Let's make sure he's wrong. We ride now, no stopping." They mounted up, riding hard out of dry wash. The message was sent, the trap was identified, and the target was clear. The scent of blood was on the wind now. The old mesa crossing was a narrow, steep-sided defile that cut through a vast plateau. It was a perfect bottleneck, allowing easy defense. The sun had begun its descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the red clay. Billy and his gang were concealed high on the eastern ridge, looking down on the crossing. They counted 6 men, including Bart Cullen, 30s, recognizable by his heavy beard and expensive vest, nestled among the rocks, waiting patiently. "Cullen's a good hunter. He's got the high ground and the bottleneck. He expects us to come through the wash like fools," Tom whispered, his rifle resting on a rock. "He's a good hunter, but a lazy one. He expects us to walk into his line of fire. We ride high, Jake. Come in from the back. Hit them from the west where they ain't got no cover," Billy ordered. "But the ridge is too steep, boss. We'll be exposed," Charlie objected. "We'll be exposed for 50 yards. They'll be too surprised to aim straight. They'll be expecting us to come up the canyon. We hit the ridge at the golden hour. The sun will be right in their eyes. That's our edge." Billy distributed Deacon's leather gear and knife to Charlie. "Throw this down the canyon before we start. Let Cullen see it. Let him know who sent the calling card. I want him to know we took his man and we know his game." Charlie nodded, tossing the bloody gear down the rocky slope. It tumbled end over end, coming to rest in the middle of the pass, a grim announcement. A minute later, a shout went up from the men below. Cullen picked up the bloody holster and looked around, his face a mask of sudden fury mixed with raw fear. His trap was sprung, but the prey was nowhere to be seen. Dirt Jake, acting as the decoy, fired a single loud round into the canyon wall opposite the ambush. The sound echoed deafeningly. The men below scrambled, looking for the source of the fire. That was the signal. Billy, Charlie, and Tom spurred their horses hard, riding down the impossibly steep western slope. They were exposed, a trio of riders silhouetted against the blinding setting sun. "Now! Charge!" Billy roared, drawing both Colts. Cullen's men finally spotted them. Rifles barked, the sharp cracks of the gunfire splitting the evening air. Dust kicked up all around the charging outlaws. "Hit the dirt!" Tom's horse went down, throwing him clear. Tom rolled, came up on one knee and fired his Winchester, catching a rifleman squarely in the chest. Charlie and Billy dismounted, diving behind a cluster of boulders, returning fire methodically. The smoke and noise were overwhelming. One of Cullen's men tried to flank them, scrambling over the rocks. Dirt Jake, using his long-range Winchester from the ridge, put a bullet right through the man's shoulder, dropping him instantly. "3 down!" Billy shouted, his eyes locked on Cullen's position. Cullen, seeing his plan crumble, abandoned his men and sprinted toward the far side of the canyon, desperate to escape the onslaught. "He's running! Get him!" Billy didn't hesitate. He took off after Cullen on foot, leaping over rocks and dead bodies. The sun was now a deep, angry orange, illuminating the final chase. Cullen reached a small, level patch of ground and stopped, realizing he was cornered. He turned, pulling his Colt .45. His face, once arrogant, was now contorted with rage and fear. "You bastard, Bonnie! Rutherford will skin you alive. Rutherford's business is his own, Cullen. This is my business. You messed with a man's boy. You ain't fit to walk the earth." This was a classic Western duel. 2 men, face to face, with the weight of the code and the setting sun as witnesses. The air was thick with the smell of alkali and gunpowder. The moment stretched, charged with heavy silence. Cullen drew first, his movement fast, fueled by adrenaline. Billy was faster. His shots were a single, seamless, devastating blur. Cullen stumbled back, dropping his gun. 2 perfect shots, one to the center of his chest, the other to his gut. He stared at Billy, his eyes wide with disbelief, the blood blooming dark against his expensive vest. The boy. He'll remember, Cullen gasped, collapsing onto the dusty trail. That's right, Cullen. He'll remember justice. Billy stood over the body, the smoke curling from the barrels of his Colts. The fight was over. The canyon fell into an immediate, profound silence, broken only by the distant whinny of the horses. 2 days later, the gang rode back into Fort Sumner, cleaner and quieter. The townsfolk stared, but no one dared challenge them. Sheriff Elias Reed was nowhere to be seen. The corrupt lawman had wisely vanished. Billy dismounted and walked into the livery stable. Josiah Miller was there, tending a horse, his eyes still weary, but holding a flicker of new light. "Barney, I heard the talk. They say you had a run-in with Cullen and his men." Billy reached into his saddlebag and pulled out Cullen's expensive vest, still stained with blood and dirt. He dropped it at Miller's feet. "Cullen won't be seeing the dawn again, Miller. Neither will the other two. They tried to set a trap. They failed." Miller looked at the vest, then up at Billy. His eyes were moist, but he didn't cry. He saw the violence, but he recognized the fulfillment of the vow. "Justice, Bonnie. Harsh, bloody justice. Thank you. It's done. We balanced the scales. Rutherford's game is exposed. The Santa Fe ring will find new dogs, but they'll be more careful next time. You tell the boy that the West ain't always kind, but there are still men out here who pay their debts." Billy turned to leave, the setting sun painting the stable walls a bloody red. "Billy, what about you? What about the law?" Billy paused, looking back. He smiled, a youthful, fleeting expression of weary defiance. "The law? The law is what men make it, Miller. And out here sometimes, the law needs a faster gun than the sheriff's. We ride before the next one comes looking. Good luck, partner." He walked out, the sound of his spurs fading away. The 4 outlaws rode east, disappearing into the vast, unforgiving darkness of the New Mexico territory, leaving behind a trail of crimson dust and the hard-won understanding that on the frontier, the code of an outlaw could sometimes be the only true measure of justice.